back. Thank you for staying with us. So today marks the final opportunity for South Africans to weigh in on the country's proposed overhaul of its citizenship, immigration and refugee framework. The deadline for public comment follows an extension this was aimed at encouraging broader public participation. The policy document released in December by the Department of Home Affairs outlines proposed reforms that could significantly reshape how South Africa manages migration, neutralization as well as asylum. Officials say feedback received will help them inform the next phase of legislative and policy development. For more on this now, let's bring you this conversation. Thulani Mavuso is from Home Affairs and is the spokesperson there, as well as Jacinta Ngobese Zuma, who's from March and March. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Let's start with you, Mr. Mavuso. Just for viewers only hearing about this now, can you briefly explain what prompted the department to propose a full overhaul of South Africa's citizenship, immigration and refugee framework, just in a nutshell?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. So we started this process a few years back where we published the white paper on international migration because we wanted to ensure that we review our migration policy to align with international practices, but also learning from some of the lessons.
Does this guy sound South African to you? It's just a question. I'm hearing an accent here that I'm like, are you guys, am I the only one? Are you picking up on the way this man is speaking? Thulani Mavuso. We're looking at the immigration paper to see if the nah, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, let's continue.
2002 immigration laws. But subsequent to that, in 2019, we took a decision that we needed to include citizenship and refugee protection in that reform because there's been an abuse, so to say, of immigration laws because it allows someone to arrive in the country as, for example, a temporary resident and then obviously migrate to permanent residence and subsequently migrate to citizenship. So we wanted to delink the acquisition of citizenship with immigration status. So that is why we have now obviously developed this white paper, which will subsequently now repeal the 3 pieces of legislation by creating one legislation to ensure that both citizenship and immigration are talking to each other. So that's where we are in the process, and we have done the public consultation process now. As you've correctly said, today is the last day for us to receive a written public inputs on the white paper.
I'm going to ask you about the level of public engagement that you got.
One thing I really love about this particular anchor is that you can clearly hear that he's a patriotic South African, unlike the likes of Naledi from Newsroom Africa, who are always on the side of the Gueres. Yeah? So I think what's interesting here is how Thulani Mavuso is presenting this as if it's a very straightforward, transparent policy without giving us the full context of what's really being implemented, not what's being proposed to the public. And this is how politicians keep getting away with their deception and have gotten away with their deception for so many years by giving the public a false sense of security, making us think that they are trying to do what's best and what's fair for the citizens of the country. Like you just heard him here clearly stating that, you know, this is in the interests of the South Africans. Again, that's just to put us to sleep, to make us docile and think that whatever the government is doing, whatever politicians are doing is in our interest, when we know the reality is that whatever policies they're implementing are in the interest of the globalists, the world elites. Those are the people calling the shots. The international NGOs, the global elites, Those are the people that are controlling our courts and controlling our laws in the country. But the politician's job is to create this false sense of sovereignty and independence just to calm us down, just to keep us quiet and keep us thinking that we are actually in control or that we have a say over what happens in our country. Remember, I keep telling you guys, democracy is one of the biggest farces. It's a complete lie. We don't have a democracy in South Africa. It's a disguised dictatorship where we are told by politicians what we want to hear to calm us down and make us think that we are sovereign and that we are in control of the policies that are being made in the country. When in reality, the people running the show, the globalists, and the politicians are here to make sure that they implement the dictates from these globalists. Now, one thing I love about how Jacinta tackles this is that she strips bare the actual agenda that this particular gentleman is trying to conceal. It's a shame that we have to speak to our elders in such a disparaging way, but we're being undermined, whether deliberately or not. I'm not sure that Thulani is, you'll hear the way that he reasons. It raises some questions about his IQ, because it's either he's really stupid or he really thinks that we're dumb as the audience listening to him and that he can get away with trying to be slick. And Jacinta's not going for it. That's why the title of this is that Jacinta wa Mutribula. She's running laps around this guy as far as logic, because whatever the politicians are doing right now is completely illogical and needs to be called out, because they're trying to get away with pushing a globalist agenda right under our noses, and they think we won't comment on it. They think we're not smart enough to read between the lines and understand what they're actually doing. They think we're not smart enough to see through the BS, to see through all of this so-called the Constitution says, to realize that we're being undermined and that we're not actually, we don't actually have a say in this country. It's an illusion that we get to have a say. We don't, in reality, right? But let's listen to Jacinta's response.
Got out of this, but we'll come to that. Let's just park it for now to bring in Jacinta as well. So Jacinta, you just heard there from the department, says that this was, something that was needed to fix a system. Do you get a sense that it is really addressing some of those policy inefficiencies that we've been seeing, or this is something that might not work? What sense are you getting?
Firstly, I'd just like to thank you guys for the opportunity. And Mr. Mavuso, we know each other from the consultations. We have actually met, and we are one of the people who are very excited on this process. But we are actually even more sad that it's taken so long for this process to start, because as he mentioned, this is something that they identified a long time ago when it was Minister Mutwaledi who brought it to the fore. And it revealed for South Africans the process that government goes through to actually have these policies sometimes doesn't reach the people. And it was actually a process where government had to go back and consult the people, which is something they should have done initially. And this is what makes us sad about a lot of things that have to do with the Department of Home Affairs, that there's certain things that are taken and decisions that are taken that don't go through public consultation, that go straight, and we hear them being discussed as in courts when the department is being taken to court, etc. One of them, for example, is that a husband can now take a wife's surname, and it's some of the things that did not go through public consultation, and we are wondering why the department did not do that. So this process of the white paper is one of the things that should have actually started with the people, because we find ourselves now being integrated forcefully with refugees or people who claim to be refugees, and we didn't ask them to be in the country. There's no refugee camps. We were not consulted on that, but here we find ourselves having to deal with those people.
Perfect logic. You cannot force us to live with people that we don't want to live with in our country. And if you say the Constitution and the laws of the country are written in the best interests of the citizens, then you cannot come back and then contradict yourself and then use that same Constitution to say, well, we can't do anything about the things that are afflicting you because the Constitution says. If the Constitution was written in the best interests of South Africans, and South Africans are complaining about laws that are being enforced by the government, then you cannot later come back and say, oh, but it's unconstitutional for us to do things that serve South Africans after you just said the Constitution was written to serve South Africans. It's too easy. I feel stupid having to, and even for Jacinta to have to rehash the same arguments we've been making over the last few years, saying the same exact things over and over and over again. And the government keeps coming back with new strategies and new ways of manipulating the situation to make it seem less obvious that they're doing what we clearly can tell and know that they're doing, which is to commit a G-side, okay, wink, wink, a black G-side using the Constitution. They want to make it lawful for them to replace black South Africans from their indigenous homeland and G-side us, to remove us, to replace us. They're doing it systematically in the same way that apartheid was a system and it was legal. So we're not going to sit here and be told by people that think that they're academically superior to us about what the Constitution says, because the Constitution is not serving the interests of the public. And you cannot say it is if after after we look at the Constitution, which they're going to get into now, we're told that the Constitution is addressed to everyone and not South African citizens. That's a contradiction. Then it does not serve the interest. I hate going over such stupidity and correcting it. This is too dumb for us to even really address and talk about. We should be talking about more serious things than this show that the government is putting on, where they're pretending to not understand what the Constitution says, where they're clearly misinterpreting the Constitution and pretending as if it has been written for the entire world. There's no Constitution in the world that's written for everyone. It's written for the citizens because we are affected by the laws that are made in our country. Other people have their own laws. So Jacinta rightfully addresses several things that they've been getting away with not consulting the public and forcing us to live with people that we did not agree to live with, because there are no refugee camps. These people are integrated into our neighborhoods, and we are forced to be exposed to people from different cultures that are incompatible with our own cultures here in South Africa and make do with that. Hence why there's these accusations of xenophobia, because nobody would like somebody just coming into their home with their own cultures, their own religions, their own beliefs, and encroaching on our territory.
Opportunity to respond, because I know you're listening as well. Go ahead.
No, thank you very much. I think let's maybe take back the process. As I've indicated, that these pieces of legislation, your Citizenship Act, which was of 1995, your Refugee Act of 1998, then the Immigration Act of 2002. So these policies have been implemented for a period since 1994, for an example. Now we're saying that they need to be reviewed in this regard. So let me go back. On the one that husbands can take their wives' and surnames, it's not a Home Affairs policy. This was a court matter that two individuals took the department to court because the husband wanted, and the court ruled in their favor.
You see, Thulani Mavuso is not actually intelligent enough to realize how he's exposing himself and our government, because what he's admitting to is that two people, right, can take the government to court, and because of a court ruling, enforce legislation that the majority of the country does not agree with. Guys, that is not democratic. That is not a democracy where two people can take the government to court and force a policy change that the citizens are not involved in. The fact that the courts can rule against the democratic process that the citizens are supposed to at least be allowed to go through is in itself unlawful. That means we are not a democracy. If two people can enforce a change that affects the entire country just because they are not happy, if you are not happy, then you need to start an organization or something to get enough votes in the next elections and get a political party that will agree with what you're trying to implement. You cannot just be upset about something, then take it to court and then force the whole country to accept the court ruling. Who is this? Who are these courts? The courts are not our bosses. They're not. This is a democracy. We must have a say. We can't be ruled by a few people that are in the courts, because that's like a mafia. We don't get to have an opinion. The courts just decide. We don't give a damn about any court ruling. We don't care what the court says. The court cannot dictate to us how our lives should be. This is not a dictatorship. If we're going to call this thing a democracy, then they must follow, as they like to say, due protocol. You cannot enforce law changes just because of two people. That is absurd.
On refugees, it is true, Jacinta is correct that, and we have also been on record saying that we have people who are abusing the asylum system, who are not supposed to be there. These are economic migrants. And what we're saying now, we're trying to tighten the system, because we cannot allow a situation where someone who's coming to the country claiming to be a asylum seeker but is able to return home all the time. That's one issue. Secondly, the approval rate.
These are not new issues. We have so-called asylum seekers and fake asylum seekers and fake refugees that go back home on holiday, the same countries that they claim they're being persecuted in. This is not a difficult situation, because what are they doing at the border? This is where you deal with this issue, because these systems need to be connected and speaking to each other within the government to say, hey, this person registered for asylum, but here they are stamping in and out of the country, moving back and forth between the country that they claim that they're being persecuted in and South Africa. Their own systems need to be integrated in such a way that they're able to pick up on these things. And again, Thulani Mavuso, with everything he says, he keeps exposing the incompetence. And I don't want to call it incompetence, because that's giving them an easy way out. It's deliberate. It's a globalist agenda. It's deliberate. It's not incompetence. These people know what they're doing, and they think we're too stupid to call it out. And that's where they've made a mistake. Because there's no ways an asylum seeker can be traveling back and forth, go home, and it doesn't ring any alarm bells to say to the immigration department that, hey, there's a problem here at the border. We have mass numbers of people who are asylum seekers or refugees stamping in and out of the country to go back home for vacation. We watched this happen in real time during December. We were well aware that a lot of these people are asylum seekers and fake refugees. How is it that the government, with all the intelligence that they have on the country, is not aware that this is happening and cannot find an effective way to resolve it? Why are we doing talk shops on SABC, talking nonstop, talking about what they're going to do and what they're proposing and what they wish to do, while this criminality is going on in the country? Guys, I'm telling you, all of this talking is just a delay tactic. This is what governments do. They have an agenda that they are trying to play out. And the more they can engage the citizens in talk shops, talking, and okay, we've heard your cries, we've heard you, like Ramaphosa. Duma Boko actually said something interesting to Botswana. He said that the politicians who make these policies during election campaigns are under no contractual obligation to adhere or to implement any of the policies they promise the people during their campaign. He said it's not a contract, which is very revealing. It's very telling about how politicians think and understand. And it's true, because what ramifications do politicians suffer for lying? We've come to associate politicians with telling lies, and yet there's no legal framework that protects the citizens against dishonesty from politicians. That is to tell you that the system, by design and from its very nature, is meant to be a tool for deception. Anybody that still believes in the political system, you're missing a trick here. The world and citizens need to catch up to what's actually going on. These people are taking us for a ride. They're stalling and using delay tactics to try to get through their terms so they can implement all the instructions given to them by their globalist bosses. That's what's really going on. People need to smarten up and wisen up to this. These guys have no intention of doing anything we, the public, tell them to do. No matter how much we scream and shout about it, they're going to continue to implement the policies of their funders, the people who are giving them money. That's who they respond to.
is sitting at about 5%. So almost 95% of the applications for asylum
politician are false. Remember, these people are under no obligation to tell you the truth, meaning even the statistics they publish can be lies, and there's no legal framework where they can suffer repercussions in South Africa. Politicians are allowed to lie and get away with corruption, and there is no punishment for it. Ramaphosa and Ramaphosa is going to do a commission like what we currently have is the Madlanga Commission. No arrests are going to be made. We know how these things go. No matter what is exposed or revealed, there's going to be no consequences. It's a talk shop that is a waste of money and designed to do what? To stall. They are stalling and buying time so they can implement the policies of their globalist leaders. The more we keep engaging these people in discussions and back and forths, the more time we waste. We are wasting time. We know what we need to do as citizens. You cannot engage these morons and go back and forth with them. Although I commend Jacinta for what she's doing, because what she's truly doing is she's educating the public and exposing these politicians so that more and more people can wake up to the reality that we're facing. These politicians are not going to implement anything that's in the interest of the South African public. They are going to continue to implement the interests of the globalist leaders. Understand it. The political system from its inception was designed to be rigged, to create a false sense of autonomy, a false sense of independence, a false sense of having a choice in your own country. We don't have a choice. These politicians are running like dictators, telling us what's best for South Africans as if they know better than us, the people who are experiencing the day-to-day lives in South Africa. They, the politicians, are shielded from these things because they live a very privileged life that is very pampered by our tax money and money from the globalists. They are not in touch and in tune with what the general public is going through. This is why we cannot listen to their dictates. They cannot tell us. We have lived experiences. We are going to tell them. And anyway, we know they're not going to listen. So that means we got to go to the next step. During apartheid, they tried to silence us. And what did we do? We responded accordingly.
Unfounded. So therefore, those people, if they are failed as asylum seekers, then they need to return from the countries of origin. But what the law allows them, for an example, is to appeal. They are able to take their matter to the Refugee Appeals Authority, and where the matter can stay a bit longer while it's still being investigated. But also in 2008, 2009, we had unprecedented number of asylum seekers, which the number reached over 200,000 in each year. In those instances, we had people who had appealed those particular decisions to reject their asylum. Now, prior to us having the Refugee Appeals Authority, we had a Refugees Appeal Board where the members of the appeals board had to sit as a quorum to hear a matter. So we have since amended the legislation to allow members of the board to hear as matters individually so that they don't sit as a quorum. So that is fast tracking. So all these reforms are gearing towards ensuring that
Are gearing towards. They can't talk about results. This is, guys, you got to this is just political talk, political speak, double speak, like the book 1984 talks about. They say one thing and do another. They're very well trained. They've got the gift of gab in talking to you to soothe your emotions, to calm you down so that there's no unrest while they continue to screw you over. He's talking about we are implementing, what are the talked about results? Don't tell us about what you're going to do. What have you done? The answer is nothing. See, a politician's job is to come here and sweet talk you, sing you a lullaby until you fall asleep. You have to understand and learn how to listen to what they're saying, read between the lines, interpret what they're saying, and call out their BS, which Jacinta does here very effectively. I love Jacinta. In the heat of the moment on a live debate, not only is she brave, she's incredibly bright and very sharp. And the way she articulates things in a way that the layman can understand, because she breaks down the hypocrisy of the government and communicates in a way that allows the average South African to have access and understand what's going on in the country and what these politicians are really doing. So we thank Jacinta Ngobese for mosebetsi o o etsang.
Integrity and sovereignty of the country. We prioritize the issues of South Africans in relation to jobs where skills are available in the country, and ensure that whatever skills that we bring from somewhere else is skills that we do not have in South Africa. Those are the bases that we are actually reforming this particular environment.
Again, this guy's talking to us like we're fools. Talk about we are making sure that they're bringing skills into the country that we don't have. We have doctors in the country who are unemployed, but foreign doctors are getting jobs. We have lawyers that are unemployed, but foreigners are getting jobs as lawyers in this country. On the ground, it's a different reality from what this man is here sitting here telling us. Foreigners have infiltrated every department, including sensitive government departments, sensitive information about the country, intelligence about the country. They're there. And this man is here lying to the public about how they're ensuring that it's only the, jobs that South Africans cannot do that are going to fall. It's a lie. I mean, foreigners are coming here to open spaza shops. They're dominating our informal markets. Informal businesses are being run by them. The reality on the ground is the complete opposite to what this man is saying. He is a bold-faced liar. This is a grown man, an adult, hot man who came on live TV to lie. He's lying to you, South Africans. He does not respect you enough to tell you the truth. He's telling bold-faced lies to your face, telling you that this is what they're doing. They're not doing that. They're doing the opposite. They're making sure that we continue to be invaded. And you will see him now start to fall apart when Jacinta starts to call him out. Because he's telling us all these beautiful policies that sound amazing, speaking really good English, talking about what they're going to implement, what they're going to do, which they never do.
That the number of years that a person has stayed in the country will no longer be a factor to determine whether the person can qualify for citizenship. So that's what the white paper says.
All right, I'm going to come in there because this is not the first time we're having conversations around such reform, especially when we look at the capacity that we have as South Africa. Jacinta, I see they also shaking your head. Perhaps let's get you in as well and just hear from you if you think the practical implementation of all of this could work ideally.
Well, I do believe that if government is more intentional about it, it could work. Because remember, we're dealing with a government that has a lot of beautiful policies, but the implementation of them is really, really questionable. Because that's why we find Home Affairs officials being able to bypass certain things in order to make money out of the system. So if Home Affairs is giving, for example, I'll just say papers to refugees to certify their refugee status, what is the department doing in order to make sure that those documents for refugees, for example, are not being photocopied? And what is the system, the integrated system that they use to check that when a person who claims to be a refugee, for example, is opening a tuck shop and they're working with the Department of Small Micro Businesses and Enterprises, for example, do they have a system that is integrated? But more than anything, what worries us as people who are patriotic South African citizens is the fact that this white paper discussion has been opened for South Africans. But what we have come to see in some of these consultation processes and what we've seen in many of these discussions that have been going on is that we find that foreign nationals who are here in the country are also being given given an opportunity to contribute to this white paper on immigration, which completely defeats the purpose. Now you're saying to us that you're giving an opportunity to the same people that we're trying to fix our country from, an opportunity to make inputs that tell us how to properly run the immigration process in our own country. You know, I know that there's our Progressive Forces members who actually got into a consultation where there was one of these foreign-funded NGOs, and what we found there was disgusting, actually, that these NGOs are transporting people to come to the consultations, and when they get there, they start making inputs for themselves on what must happen with our white paper. And it doesn't end there. This platform was open for South Africans, but even people in Zimbabwe who are living there currently are able to make inputs about the state and status of the country when it comes to immigration. So we want to know from Mr. Mavuso and the department, how are they going to sift out and select these inputs that are from South Africans? Because we don't need, and by rights, I don't even understand, why should we have inputs from people who are non-South Africans on a South African matter?
Mr. Mavuso, you hear there some of the sharpest criticisms around this matter is that you can't have people playing both referee and player.
You know, having Jacinta as a representative is it's a great thing for us as South Africans, because not only is she a great leader, like I said, she's able to really break down what is playing out and the level of corruption that's playing out, and make it easy for everybody to understand. Because again, the journalist, the anchor, doing a great job, because we know whose side he's on. He's clearly on our side. I personally know him as a very patriotic South African. And yeah, you can't play referee and player at the same time. It's not fair. So they're pretending. This government, it's a bold-faced deception. They are pretending to be doing a democratic process, but rigging it at the same time to ensure that when the results come back, then they'll say, oh well, these are the results and this is what people want, right? And they'll say we open it up to the public to make it fair, and these are the results. It's pretentious, it's a lie, it's corrupt. And we're calling it out because we see through exactly what they're trying to do. In opening up, you're undermining the voices of South Africans. It's another way of silencing us, because now you got these corrupt NGOs, like Jacinta says, that are using people that are in other African countries to vote and give their input on South African policy, which doesn't make sense. Because then what is the point of opening it up to us as South Africans to give our input? You're drowning out our voices by opening up to the entire continent, because we're outnumbered if you open it to the entire continent. Then it's not a fair democratic process, because you're allowing people that have more numbers to overwhelm our voice. And then tomorrow you're going to come back and say, well, we opened up the process and these are the results, so that you can continue pushing your globalist agenda. We see through this nonsense. We see right through what's going on. And they're going to, guys, they're not going to stop. Please understand that even though we've caught these people out time and time again, they're going to continue to push this globalist agenda, because they've got a plan for Agenda 2030. They're on a timeline. They're pushing digital IDs. They're pushing all these different things that they're being told to do by the globalists. And they're on a timeline. And we're making it very difficult for them to meet their deadlines, because we're pushing back and pushing back. Unlike other countries like Zimbabwe, Zimbabweans don't even care that Mnangagwa has gone against his word that he wouldn't run for another term. He's extended it and changed the constitution, and Zimbabweans are saying nothing. They're not even fighting. They're just a bunch of cowards, those people. That's why we don't want them anywhere near us. We will support people that are strong and want to fight for their own rights. But South Africans, we're not stupid. We're not going to allow these people to bully us in our own country. If you say that this is a democratic process and there's fairness involved, then we demand fairness, and we demand a proper democratic process, not the pseudo democracy that they're showing us right now.
Well, I think in terms of our constitution, there's nothing that prohibits any person to make any input into that. We work with international organizations, for an example, United Nations, the AU, SADC, in policy formulation, whether we're dealing with Africa, free trade agreement, and many other.
This is where he starts to unravel, because Jacinta has called out a bunch of different controversial really conspiracies, not theories, real conspiracies. She's called them out on public, on live TV for the entire country to know what's really going on behind the scenes. See, this man, Thulani, came here to, to sweet talk us and sing us a lullaby, not knowing that Jacinta came to expose, to blow the whistle on what's really going on behind the scenes. Now he has to defend that. And what does he immediately do when you expose the corruption, like all the politicians do? They start talking about the Constitution. The Constitution does not prohibit, which is such a, this is just pure criminality. This is how a criminal mind works. He tries to talk himself out of it by hiding behind the Constitution to defend lawlessness, to defend corruption, to defend unrighteousness, to say, oh, but the law doesn't stop us. In other words, the government is finding loopholes so they can push corruption and then protecting themselves by saying, well, the law doesn't stop them from being corrupt in this particular context. This is pure, we're listening to a criminal mind. We're no longer listening to Thulani Mavuso. We're listening to Thulani, the criminal, the corrupt criminal that didn't think that Jacinta would blow the whistle and that South Africans are aware of what's actually going on behind the scenes. He came to spew some political jargon and think he will get away with it because nobody will question him. Now Jacinta's blowing the lid on this whole operation. And listen to the first thing he says, well, the Constitution doesn't say we can't. Well, if the Constitution doesn't say you can't encourage people to go jump off a cliff, does it mean it's right for you to do it? So these guys are now hiding behind, well, the Constitution doesn't say we should, but it also doesn't say that you need to do it the way that you're doing it. So why are you choosing to do it this particular way, which South Africans are saying is unfair? Guys, please wake up. Please wake up and stop relying on these leaders and relying on these laws and the so-called Constitution and Immigration Act. Those things are just there for decoration. What is actually being implemented is the shadow government's policies, the NGOs, the courts, the globalists, the global elites. Those are the people making policy in your country. And the military and the police and all these different mafias and syndicates are there to make sure that these things are enforced while we are crippled by crime and poverty in the country. To basically silence us. Unemployment is done deliberately, poverty deliberately, segregation deliberately, no access to resources like water and electricity. It's all deliberate. And the plan, the motive, the intention is to silence us.
So what I would like to say in that regard is that as a global community, we have to collaborate to ensure that we are not.
Did we agree to be a global community? This guy is just telling us things as if, yeah, well, this is just how it is. No, we never said that we want to be a part of a global community where people from outside are allowed to make policies and laws that affect how we live our lives in our own country. We never agreed to this. So you can't tell us, well, we're a global community, therefore anything is justifiable. Anybody can say anything from anywhere in the world, and we are forced to live with whatever they decided wherever they are in our country. It undermines the thing where he says the Constitution is there for the best interest of South Africa and to uphold our sovereignty. This is not upholding, it undermines our sovereignty. To say that the Constitution allows because we're a part of a global, why are we a part of this global community? Did we have a say in it? Just because we have trade deals with other countries? Okay, then if that's the case, then pull out of all of them. Pull out of everything. We don't want to be a part of the global community. You know what they're going to tell us? Oh, no, but we can't do that because the Constitution says this. They're just using the Constitution like how people use the Bible to justify anything. I mean, pastors are literally using the Bible to justify fornication. Like, dude, it's insane. They're literally robbing churchgoers in church a stick up, telling them, give me your money right now because the Bible says so. So now the Constitution is being used as this thing that cannot be changed.
We're not operating as an island as government of South Africa. Unfortunately, South Africa is part and parcel of international instruments and international law and signatory.
Listen to the language. He says, unfortunately, South Africa. In other words, you can't do anything about it. But again, that's a contradiction. You just said the Constitution is supposed to uphold our sovereignty. So what sovereignty do we have as citizens if you're telling us that we're a part of a global community? That means we're not sovereign. That means what's the point of calling us a country? You're saying that global citizens have access to, and it's not true with every other country. Why should it only be true with South Africa? I can't just start making laws in China. I can't make laws in Italy. I can't just go to another country and start making dictates of what they should do and taking their government to court and forcing them to make the people there live according to what my desires are as a foreigner. This guy says, unfortunately, we've signed. Why did you sign those things? Did you consult us before you signed them? You can't just tell us, well, it's too late. We're already in it. No, we're going to make you walk just these things back because you're signing all these agreements behind our backs and then just publishing them in the newspaper when they're already done. No consultation process was had with the public. We're going to hold these people accountable and stop them from thinking they can get away doing it. And they're going to continue. And the more they continue, we're going to keep pushing back and making their lives very difficult until they make it unequivocally clear what it is they're running. The type of operation they're running here is a dictatorship. So they cannot then call us vigilantes when we do what we're supposed to do to defend ourselves. You understand? We want them to reveal their hand. So they can't say, oh, it's exphobia or it's this or it's that. We are currently experiencing a G-side of natives in South Africa. And we just want to make it apparent enough so South Africans get frustrated and tired enough to where they take action. That's what we're trying to do right now. We're letting them expose themselves. We don't need to do much more. We just show that, guys, this is what's going on. And then in the background, we know what we're doing. We know what we're working on because we're ready for these people. They're trying to use foreigners as a buffer to stop us from attacking them and dealing with them decisively. They want us to first be worn out by these illegal immigrants that they're forcing into our country.
And therefore, collaboration with those international bodies becomes very important. We also have bilateral engagements and work at multilateral fora with our partners to ensure that there's common understanding between ourselves in terms of how we manage all our issues. So therefore, South Africa's constitution does not prohibit any input that is exclusive on any policy issue because, as I said, we work with different institutions across the world.
All right, Jacinta, yeah, go ahead.
I think I find it so.
It's crazy because just because you have agreements or deals with other countries doesn't mean that the citizens of those countries are allowed to make decisions and policies that affect how we live our lives in our country. Listen to the logic of this ridiculous clown of a person called Thulani Mavuso. Just stupid reasoning. Stupid reasoning. And Jacinta's about to continue cooking him.
Messes up on something, they run to claiming that the Constitution says, because the Constitution has limitation clauses, and limitation clauses are there for a reason, because they are of the understanding that certain things are meant only for the citizens, and there's no Constitution in the world that was drawn up for every single person. You're talking about bilateral agreements, and you're talking about having international relations, and also telling us that you can't limit people from their input about our country. So if I was to ask Mr. Mavuso, then where does South Africa become a sovereign country if we have to listen to what other people from outside of South Africa are saying to us about our country? Are you telling me that this country belongs to every single person who's outside of the country and can make contributions and decisions for people living in South Africa? Why is that not the case then when you're voting? Why don't you ask those same people and those international NGOs and those organizations to be the ones that come here and vote? You can't ask us to vote and then turn around and tell us that when we're making inputs, everyone is allowed to have a say in those inputs. We vote because we want our votes to speak for us, not to speak for the whole world.
So, and Mr. Mavuso, I think from where I'm seated now, this speaks to a need, and that would be a need for us to really work around this and just to also gauge a sense from you as to this entire process as well, and the type of level of public engagement that you got. Some of the criticism that we heard there from Jacinta is that you cannot have, some of the people come and play both referee and player at the same time, but you also, go straight to the Constitution, which it says it's touted to safeguard the interests of South Africans, but that's essentially something that you seem to be losing along the line. Let's get your response on that, because I'm also just trying to get a sense of the level of public engagement that you got in this whole.
Yeah, I love this journalist because both Jacinta and the analyst are exposing him. Because, guys, we're smart. South Africans are smart people. And when these politicians come here trying to dribble us, we expose them on live television and show them that they don't know what the hell they're talking about. There are limitations within this constitution because it's impossible that our small nyana tax money is enough to take care of 8 billion people in the globe. That's not realistic. And it's not, the constitution was obviously written with a globalist agenda behind. All the constitutions and all the laws of the world were written with a globalist agenda in mind because that's where the world is headed, or they're trying to force the world to go in that direction. And as South Africans, we must push back and frustrate these demonic plans. But now you got two people that are using their brains and exposing what the nonsense this politician is talking about. Let's listen to how he responds.
Got in this whole process?
No, thank you very much. Well, I do understand that the issues of this nature can be very emotive and raises a number of contested subjects. But let me explain. Any law that is being created is in the interest of South Africans. I think let's just take one point. The reason why we took this to public consultation because we are duty bound as government to be able to consult members of the public, particularly South Africans, on any policy that is made. Now, we're consulting because South Africans have got lived experiences where they've lived side by side.
Blah, 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 blah. Bro, you can, as soon as he gets into the political jargon and he starts spewing all the rhetoric that politicians are trained to say that is in the best interest, how is it in the best interest of South Africans when there's protests every single week about immigrants in the country? But you're saying that these things are in the best interest, and this is why we opened up the white paper. There's no need to open up a white paper discussion or dialogue. That's just a waste of time, and it's stalling so that you can continue to push things to where it will eventually be too late for any change. And then you'll tell us, guys, there's nothing we can do. This is how the other countries are in the world. We're not the only ones, therefore we should just accept these dictates. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to stall long enough until it's too late, until they introduce the digital ID and it becomes too late for anybody to do anything or to resist because they can just cut you off the system. So again, he gets into the political jargon of it was written with the best interest of. That's not what's playing. We've just exposed that. We've just called it out by giving you practical examples, and he defaults to his political jargon because that's the setting that these guys are on to try to deceive the general masses. But you're not fooling us. We see right through you, and he cannot offer a rebuttal to what he's being told. He has to kind of go into this sort of autopilot mode of just spewing nonsense and political jargon about the Constitution, the best interests of South Africans and South Africans' lived experiences. Shut the hell up and address the concerns and the things that are being issues that are being exposed. You must have something to say. We are exposing you and the corruption behind your globalist government, and you're not responding. You're telling us, but the Constitution is written in the best interest. It's not, clearly. That's why we're having this panel right now.
Obviously, there are certain instances where we have admitted as government that one, our Refugee Act has not actually done us any favor because it has created many problems for us because we don't have camps. Now, when there was a case that was taken to court by an asylum seeker, where the court allowed that the asylum seeker can work and their children can study on the basis that we do not have any safe.
Did you hear that? Again, the courts. Someone took the government to court and lost. And now because of that, the whole country has to suffer. So the courts are implementing the policies of the globalists, and they're pretending as if they're holding the government ransom, or that the government's hands are tied and they can't do anything because, oh well, they won in the court fair and square. Who are these lawyers? Who are the judges? Who are these decision makers in the courts that are forcing basically a system of dictatorship on South Africans in a democratic country? You cannot tell us that, oh, a refugee took someone to court because they wanted to work and send their children to school because the government had not made provision for schools. Then why are you accepting asylum seekers and refugees if you've not made provision for them in a refugee camp? Does that make any, guys? We're not stupid. These are deliberate inconveniences. Oh, we didn't have a school. Oh, we didn't have a this, we didn't have a that. Therefore, someone was taken to court and we lost fair and square in a democratic process, and now this law has been implemented that makes the whole country suffer. It's a dictatorship. You are deliberately enforcing these laws onto the people by just a few decision makers, the courts and the globalists. And the government is pretending that they are powerless to do anything because such and such a refugee who is being used by an NGO won in the court of law. Therefore, the government. Well, then what's the point of the government? Because the government is basically telling us that they are not decision makers in the country, that the courts decide, and the NGOs are the ones who are deciding. That's what this man is admitting to. He is admitting that the NGOs and the courts are the decision makers in the country, and that the government is basically saying that their hands are tied, that they have no power. So why are we voting for a government then? We should just vote then for the judges in court and vote for NGOs.
Integrate into communities. And again, what we are saying is that there are lessons learned from that particular process. So that is why now the review of these particular instruments or policies and legislation is to take those lessons learned to be able to say, how do we then correct that moving forward? That's the one issue. The second issue, as I've indicated at the beginning, we're saying that we are not only saying that South Africans should be exclusively participating in the process. We do understand that South Africans are of the view, as we are going through this process, Jacinta is correct. I think they were there with their group and many other provinces where we were, where the people were quite clear to say, why do we have some of the people who are foreign nationals in the room? Because we've got academics, we've got some of the people that were participating, raising some of the issues that they've experienced themselves. Because also remember, not only South Africans have experienced certain things, also some of the foreign nationals, they can be able to share, to say what worked, what does not work for what worked for them, what were their experiences of being in South Africa. Remember, there are also South Africans who live across the world, who are also contributing in those particular countries that they.
This man is conflating various different issues, because if you say we want South Africans to comment on this Immigration Act, and then in the same breath say, but we also have to open it up and consider the experiences of the same immigrants that we, the citizens, are complaining about, you are contradicting yourself. If you want the views of the immigrants, this needs to be done from the interview process before you allow them into the country, to make sure that their desires align with what South Africans want in their own country. You cannot say we also have to consider, and he's so undermining. He says that Jacinta and her group were under the impression as if, oh, we were ill-informed about how things work. No, you are not the boss here. You are public servants. You work for us. We tell you what we want, you implement. That's what your job is as the government. You don't come and tell us and undermine us and say, oh, you guys were not well informed about this, that, and the third. We're telling you whatever you think is working is not working for us. And you cannot tell us that, oh, we opened it up to immigrants. Why are you opening it up to immigrants? We just said you cannot be player and referee at the same time. These are guys. The corruption has been exposed, and these guys cannot talk themselves out of it. The more they do, the more stupid they look.
That again, I want to emphasize the point. This was a review of a legislation based on what we want to correct and what we have experienced over the years. South Africa, as a young democracy, enacted legislations from 1994 up to now. And in those, there are lessons that we have learned, and we need to be able to do some corrective measures in there. So where we are with this one, we're saying that we have accepted the fact that the Refugee Act needs to be repealed and be fixed, but also there was an issue relating to us withdrawing from, for example, the Convention of 1951, and we've explained that the review, if we were to exit the convention, but there are certain rights that are in the convention that are also have been domesticated in our constitution and in our laws. So that's the one issue. Then there's a second issue that we have said we are correcting the issue which people are acquiring citizenship. So those are the things that I thought,
Then change the laws. The laws are not some doctrine that has been written that cannot be touched. Change the laws, because the citizens are saying, we don't want these laws. For you to say we cannot pull out of the Geneva Convention or whatever, that Immigration Act you guys signed, because the Constitution domestically also aligns with a lot of the stipulations in that convention, then change the damn laws. and then pull out. Pull out of the Geneva Convention and change the laws. That's simple. So South Africans can get what they want so that we are not slaves to these globalists and then say, oh, we're a part of a global community. How does it serve us to be a part of the global community? We're telling you it's not working for us. So for you, it's like, how can they say no? We're telling them, hey, withdraw from the convention. They say, oh, no, we're not going to withdraw because the constitution still says the same thing. Okay, then change the constitution, change the laws. Like these guys are making excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse why they refuse to change the status quo. That's all that's happening here, guys.
Is to explain the aspects of the white paper in totality so that we can be able to communicate a message to South Africans that this process is not just a lip service process, but it's a process to correct lessons that we have learned and what we believe should be the right way moving forward of limiting certain rights and benefits to those who are not supposed to be entitled to.
And Jacinta, just listening to government's assurances at this stage and also looking at, some of your public concerns and balancing the two as well, we find ourselves where there is a gap. How do we fill those gaps in?
I don't think we have a gap. I think we have a vacuum because South Africa is very short of people who are decisive leaders, people who think that they need to make provision for the fact that they're not always going to be leaders. One day their children are also going to be stuck in whatever policies or whatever decisions that they make today. Unfortunately, we don't have leaders of that caliber at the moment. We have people who are hell-bent on making sure that they protect whatever it is that they're protecting to the best of their ability. I'll take you through. First of all, if you are saying to me that you are taking inputs from South Africans and you are concerned about the fact that there are other South Africans outside of the country who still want to make a contribution, as South Africans, we all have ID numbers. If you want South Africans or anyone to contribute to the white paper on this country, that person needs to be supporting whatever contribution that they make with their ID number. So the system must be willing to do that. And if you want to hear the input of NGOs or refugees, you need to have a separate session for them where they come in with their refugee status, you check them because you're Home Affairs. Surely you have all these people's documents and you can compare them with whatever name or surname or sad story that they give you. So when you have those consultations, you know that they are from people who are genuinely concerned about the country, because we can't run a country based on the fact that we want to please anyone, or else this country will not have a future. And that's why patriots of this country are getting more and more frustrated with our government, because instead of coming up with solutions, they create more problems or solutions that look like they're solving one problem but creating another problem. I'll go to what we had said to Mr. Mavuso when we had come to the consultation process and we made our inputs. One of the things that we laid bare to them is the fact that as government, you are the decision makers, not the courts. But we find ourselves having a government that's always responding to whatever is taken to court. That's because the type of lawyers and the type of arguments that you are bringing to the court are not echoing what the Constitution says. As lawmakers, as policymakers, you need to be the ones that guide that court what the policy is. But if the government is the same people that are telling us that everyone in the Constitution refers to every single person in the whole globe that lands in the country, then that's where our problems start. Because if you as a government are clear on what your constitution, what your laws are saying, because we can't have a constitution that says one thing and then there are laws that contradict that very same constitution, it means there's a problem. And for government, if you are a government that cared about its people, you would be the one that are taking those things to the courts and challenging them, saying, but the court is saying this, and this is what the Constitution says, and this is what the South African says. Because even the law is always up for review. There's no single law that was just there made in black and white to be like that for the next million of years to come. We all are of the the understanding that laws change because people change, because situations change. Now, if people in government had that in mind, that they're serving the people of South Africa and that their interests are in the people of South Africa and not whoever walks into the country, I promise you that our leaders, our policymakers, our people in departments would be going in coherent with what the people are saying. But the reason government is pulling this way and the people are pulling that way, and now we find ourselves sounding as if we're talking two different languages, is because we have a government that does not listen to the people, that wants to keep regurgitating this thing. The Constitution says the Constitution is meant to be serving the people of South Africa.
All right.
That's why even when you have any law in the country, it goes back to making sure that the citizens are protected, the people who vote are protected. There's not a single policy maker in the country that sits there and says, oh, I want to draw a policy because Zimbabwe must be great again. It must be about South Africans. And that's why we're going to make sure that we don't get silenced by this thing of the Constitution says, because we are of the view that our government people, our officials are misinterpreting the law because they want it to sound like it's meant to serve everyone in the globe. The Constitution of South Africa is for South Africans. Therefore, we ask all the people implementing policies to remember to put South Africans first, or else don't ask us to vote for you. Go and get those votes from outside and those people that you're trying to please.
And Mr. Mavuso, you know, when you hear such sentiments, you know, that's just also a drop in the ocean. There are many broader voices as well, because now the sense is that you have a government that is out of touch with its people. As we wind this conversation up, I want to hear from you in terms of how do we allay all those fears from South Africans, and how do we sort of find common ground around this? Because there is a need for us not to be talking on top of each other, but also to be working hand in hand together in terms of finding all of those solutions that might be of assistance at this particular point in time, seeing that also that, you know, such important policies are at such a sensitive stage.
No, thank you very much. So just to explain that this white paper is not about, causing any confusion, but we want to create a rule-based and secure and economically responsive migration system that works for South Africans and lawful migrants. And I think I must indicate that South Africa is not an island, that we will not have people visiting South Africa, closing all the ranks. But what we are saying, we want to strengthen national security and the sovereignty of South Africa. So I think that's a first. We also say we want to have a clear separation between immigration, between asylum, and also citizenship pathways, because we are agreeing that we cannot have a situation where we have people who are illegal in the country, people who are getting fraudulent documents. Let me explain. Sometimes some of those fraudulent documents Jacinta is making a reference to is fraudulent documents that are not even appearing in our system. In other words, they look alike. They look like our documents, but they're not in our system. You know, it's the same way as a person who will have a fraudulent.
This guy wants us to sympathize with his excuse. He keeps exposing. Like, after what Jacinta just said, it's checkmate. It's over. Debate won. It's finished. It's over. He should have just said, thank you, Jacinta, for your submission. We've heard you. We've heard the cries of South Africans, and we will address it. Instead, he's talking as if, yeah, no, Jacinta, you don't understand. The problem is we're not an island. Which is basically to say, South Africans need to shut up, and government is going to do what they do, and we must deal with it whether we like it or not. Whether it's fair or not, whether what they're saying makes sense or not, we must just accept that this is what's going on. That's what he's telling us. That is literally what he's saying right now. He's pretending as if Jacinta doesn't understand that, oh no, you see, it's not that as simple as what you're using a very simplistic view of it. You're oversimplifying. It's that our constitution is this, and we've signed agreements, Geneva agreements, and we've done this and we've done that, and our hands are tied, and there's nothing we can do. What is the point then of you as a government? That's what Jacinta just asked you. Because all he's doing is just to try to silence Jacinta, make it seem like she's incompetent and she doesn't understand how things actually work. No, we are reading the same document, the constitution that they keep citing. We are reading from the same document and we're exposing and showing the fact that they don't know what they're talking about. We're exposing all the contradictions, and he keeps coming back and telling and spewing all this political jargon about building and boosting economic growth. Shut the hell up. Like, you're not saying anything. This is just political jargon that means absolutely nothing. All these were trying to boost economic growth. They never do it because look what our economy looks like. And he says that this thing of just shutting out foreigners and we're not going to, so you're not going to do what the citizens are asking you to do, then you are a dictatorship. You should be removed immediately from your positions because you are not serving the interests of South Africans, just like you said you were supposed to be doing at the beginning of the interview. You said the Constitution is supposed to serve the interests of South Africans. It's not. You, as lawmakers, are not, because you keep being taken to court, which actually undermines the government. The fact that he's still here, now he's making excuses about how people are making fraudulent documents. Your job is to stop this from happening. Not to try to get sympathy from us, so we say, oh, shame. Wow, what can they do? People are using fraudulent documents. You are the ones in power. Solve it. Fix it. We're paying tax for you to solve these problems.
That when someone carries a fraudulent banknote, nobody blames the Reserve Bank. But in this instance, when someone has a fake...
Bruh, this guy said nobody blames the... Do we vote for the Reserve Bank? Do we have elections to pick which Reserve Bank we want? I mean, listen to this fool. He thinks he... Guys.
System, obviously, it looks like Home Affairs has produced it. But just to deal with this, what we are saying is that in this review or reform, we want to move from an open-ended migration to skills-based and demand migration, because we want to be able to ensure that whatever that we do, we are able to have a balance in terms of critical shortages of skills. We want to attract investment so that South Africans be able to work. We want to ensure that infrastructure and industrialization is prioritized. So through all these reforms, that's what we are trying to do as government. And I think
Yet again, what we are trying to do, what we are trying to implement. And I want to interpret what he's actually saying for you guys when he says that they want to move or shift to a more skills-based immigration. But what about the damage you've already caused with the immigration that's taken place to where we are now outnumbered by foreigners? What about that damage? Is there a plan to send all these people back to their homes? You can't just mess up the country and then say, okay, we're going to move to a different phase now while we're still living with the consequences of your bad decision making. And then on top of that, to say that we're going to move to a skills-based immigration process. How can our people gain skills if you're denying them access to schools? You see what they're going to now, the excuse they're about to make now is, oh, South Africans don't have enough skills, they're not educated enough because these foreigners who are schooled in our own institutions are the ones that carry the necessary qualifications. These foreigners are not coming from better schools. These African migrants are not coming from better universities than what we have here in South Africa, at least in the African continent. But now they're going to use the excuse that these foreigners are more skilled than us, therefore that's why we're bringing so many of them in the country, as if Rona were like just these crippled people that can't think and are academically inept. We have got doctors that are sitting unemployed. What do they say about that? We have the skills. They're just not hiring us. It's a systematic exclusion. It's a G side. Guys, come on. See through this nonsense.
Around South Africans, yes, it is true that South Africans have been overwhelmed. And I explained this thing to in one of the interviews when we were being asked whether South Africans are xenophobic, and we still believe South Africans are not xenophobic. I think South Africans were overwhelmed because of some of the legislation that were created and which happen to have been abused. That is why when I tell you about 2008, 2009, that we recorded over 200,000 arrivals on asylum seekers. So those are the things that overwhelms communities, because the very same people who arrive and claim asylum, they go straight into those communities and live there. And we do accept that there is a need to review that. There's a need to reverse some of those issues to ensure that communities are able to settle in a manner that, one, they are in living spaces where government can be able to provide services. They're in living spaces where they can be able to be protected, but also to ensure that government takes the responsibility in the role of managing the issue of asylum seekers and migrants. That's exactly what we are doing. I don't believe that we are being...
South Africans are still waiting for their RDP houses since apartheid days, since 1994. But you're talking about we must make sure we bring refugees in and give them services. But there are people citizens in the country that don't have services, that you're not thinking about, that you're not making provisions for, that you're not providing for, but you're adding more weight on your shoulders by saying now we also have to think about how we're going to provide asylum and refugee status for these immigrants. Why? Because of all of your bilateral agreements and these Geneva Conventions that you refuse to sign out of or remove yourselves from because you say, but the Constitution already. No, but you can change all of these things. You are the lawmakers who are supposed to be changing them. And the fact that you're refusing to change them tells us that you are not in control of the country and what's going on. That the country is being controlled by a shadow government, and that you guys are just the puppets here to try to. And you're not smart enough to deceive us. Unfortunately, we're not falling for this bait.
Quiet when we see what is happening on the ground. We are not quiet, but also we cannot be reckless as government in terms of how we respond to these issues. We need to respond in an orderly manner that is also lawful to ensure that we do not.
There it is again. They don't want to respond in a manner that is reckless, but it's okay for them to be reckless and allow millions and millions of foreigners to come into the country to literally unalive citizens and grape citizens. That's okay. That's allowed, right? But they can't be responding and protecting and saving South African citizens. He says that that's reckless. They must be careful with the recklessness of doing what's fair and what's right for South African citizens. Are you guys listening to this nonsense that this guy's talking about here? Again, follow due protocol. So anytime it's an issue, a pressing issue that affects South Africans, they are following due protocol, which means they do nothing about it. But if a foreigner is affected by something, they're sending the military, they're sending police, they act very recklessly to protect those foreigners. Guys, we're not stupid. This guy is just the wrong person to send to try to sing us a lullaby. He's not smart enough to deceive us.
Tension and violence between those who are South Africans and those who are foreigners. Our role is to mediate to ensure that those who are supposed to return to their countries of origin, they return in an orderly manner so that they can be able to say if they were to come to South Africa, they come lawfully, because our role is to ensure that the admission of those who come into the country is done lawfully. We accept also that we have porous borders. That is something that we cannot run away from. That is why the Border Management Authority was formed. Part of its responsibility is also to manage the line.
All right, Thomas, thank you both so much for your time and insights on the program. Jacinta Ngobese Zuma is from March and March, as well as Thulani Mavuso, who's the Home Affairs spokesperson. Thank you so much indeed for your time on the program this hour.
You'll notice all these government officials ever talk about is, yes, we acknowledge we see the problem, but we cannot do this. We have to follow the correct protocol. Yes, we see the problem. We acknowledge your feelings and frustrations, but we must follow the correct protocol. Why couldn't you follow the correct protocol from the very beginning to prevent this thing from ever happening? Now that we're in a crisis, you want to tell us about following the law and following correct protocol and not doing things that are unconstitutional. It was unconstitutional for you guys to allow these people into the country anyway. It was unlawful for you to allow them into our country, into all these sensitive sectors, informal sector, public sector, government. And now when it's time to fix the problem, now you want to adhere to the law and make sure that you follow the correct protocol because we're a democratic society and that we have laws, and all this political rhetoric and jargon that is meant to stall and delay. They are not going to do anything. Their job is to keep talking to us, to keep singing us a lullaby, to put us to sleep so that they can implement the global elites agendas that are being pushed through these NGOs and evidently by the courts. South Africa, wake up.